Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Monique. If you are new here, don't forget to click on the red button below to subscribe. As promised, here is the tutorials on how to make this slanted ruched dress with side flay. So let's get into it. I'll be using 4 yards of crepe fabric for these tutorials. I'll be drafting it on a pattern paper first. So I've taken the shoulder line. I've also taken the shoulder to bust point, which is 10.5. I also took the shoulder to waist, which is 17 inches. Now the first measurement I'll take is half of the shoulder measurement, which is 7.5. I added half an inch, that's 8 inches. Then I'll take the neck width. The neck width I'll be using 3.5 inches, and the neck depth I'll also use 3.5 inches. So that's 3.5 by 3.5 inches. Now I'll come down by 1 inch for the shoulder slope. Then I'll connect the lines. So this is the neckline and the shoulder slope. Then from the shoulder slope I'll come down by 8 inches for the chest line. Then I'll use, from this point I'll take 9 inches. Then I'll draw out the line. After doing this, I'll just place the shoulder width on the chest line, that is the 8 inches. Then I'll draw out a straight line. Then I'll get the midpoint of this line. Then I'll come in by 0.75. Then I'll make a slant line to meet the 0.75. Then I'll take the bust circumference. Quarter of the bust is 9.5. The bust is 38. Then I'm adding 1.5 inches for seam allowance. Then on the waist, the quarter of the waist is 7.5. I'll be adding 1 inch for that and 1.5 inches for seam allowance. The waist is 31 inches. So after doing that, I'll take the bust span measurement. The bust span is 8 inches divided by 2 to give me 4 inches. I'm adding half an inch, that's 4.5 inches. So I'll draw out a straight line. Now I'll be connecting the lines. So this is the armhole, then I'll connect this line. So the next thing I'll do, I'll take the side darts, that's from the bust point here. I'll come down by 1 inch. That's the difference between the back and front is 1 inch. The back is 16 while the front is 17 inches. So I'll connect it to the bust point. So now I'll be drafting the back. So this is the back, this is the shoulder line, and this is the 1 inch for the zipper allowance. So now I'll take the back half length, that's shoulder to back half length. For this, I'm using 16 inches. I'll go ahead and connect it like this. Then to tighten the back to avoid zip bulge, I'll come in by 0.75. You can actually use half an inch, it's still okay, but I'm using 0.75 for this measurement. So I'll connect it out like this to the shoulder. Then I'll place the front on the back like this. So I'll be placing the front on the back pattern, that is the center front. I'll make sure it's on the zipper line like so. So I'll cut through it. I'm tracing the front, but I'll make the armhole wider, that's the back armhole wider than the front armhole with half an inch. So this is the front pattern and this is the back pattern. So I'll draw out the chest line like this. Now I'll cut out this excess. Then to get the back dart, I'll be using 5 inches. I'll place it on the zipper line. Then I'll place it also here on the chest line. Then I'll come down by 1 inch from this point. Then I'll take a straight line. Then I'll take half inch on both sides. I'll just go ahead and connect it. So I'll take for the neck depth, I'll come back down by 1.5 inches. That's for the back. I came down by 1.5 inches. I'm still using the same 3.5 inches for the neck width, so I'll cut through it. Then I'll also cut out this excess for the back tightening to avoid zip bulge. Now the back pattern is ready. Then we'll come back to the front pattern. Now I'll reshape the armhole. That's for the front pattern. Then I'll transfer this side dart to the waist dart. I'll open it up here. Then I'll close this side dart like this. So as you can see, I've transferred the side dart to the waist. So I'll just use a masking tape to secure it. So if you notice, the back and front pattern are aligning. They are equal. So I'll cut out the neckline. Then the next thing I'll do is the dress is going to have a band. So I'm going to remove 2 inches from here like this. So I'm marking out 2 inches. So I'll place the darts together like this so that I can easily cut it out. I'll repeat the same thing for the back. I'll remove 2 inches because I'll be replacing it with a band. So this is our front and back pattern. Now for the lower part of the dress, that is the skirt, I've gone ahead to mark it out. So this is the waistline. So from the waist, this is the waist to hip, I'm using 9 inches, and the waist to full length is 33 inches plus 2 inches for seam allowance. The full dress is 50 inches. So now on the waist, quarter of the waist is 7.5. I'm not adding that, I'll just add 2 inches for seam allowance. Then on the hip is 41 divided by 4. It will give me 10.25. I'll also add 2 inches for seam allowance. Then what I have here, I have about 12.5. I'll place it on the full length. So I'll add extra 2 inches to just give it a little flare on the sides. So I'll connect the lines. Then I'll be cutting this out. Then I'll take another pattern paper to cut the back. I've gone ahead to mark the zipper line. So I'll place it the front on the new pattern paper. So I'll mark out the hip line. So on the waistline, I'll come in by 1/2 inch. Remember, we're tightening our back to avoid zip bulge. So I'll connect it to the hip line like so, to the 1 inch on the hip line. Then from this point, that's from the hip line, I'll just take a straight line all the way to the full length like this. It's not a pencil skirt, so that's why. So I'll go ahead and cut it out. I'm tracing it out. Then I'll cut out this excess to give the butt area a nice effect. So we are done with our pattern. So on the front pattern, on the center front, I'll come in by 4 inches. So I'm taking 4 inches on the right side of the skirt. Then I'll come to the lower side. From this center front also, I'll take another 4 inches on the left side of the skirt like this. So I just want to create a slant line for the style of the dress. So I'll just shape it out like this. Now I'll use my ruler to connect it to the full length like so. So I'll be cutting through this line. I'll be attaching a flare on it. I'll explain that later on. So I'll cut through the line. So I've placed the front and back pattern on the fabric. So the fabric is on a fold. I use the stretchy part of the fabric on a fold. So I'll cut it out. So I've gone ahead to cut it out and I've notched where the dart is. This is the back pattern. I cut out 2. Then I also added 1/2 inch on the shoulder. I went ahead to cut out facing for the back. Then I'll be attaching interfacing to it. So this is the front. I've also notched the dart area. So I've also cut out facing for the front pattern. I'll be attaching interfacing later on. So I've gone ahead to cut out 2 pieces of band. So I'll be attaching interfacing to it, a hairstay to make it firm. So I made the band 3 inches wide. I'll be using 1 inch for seam allowance. So I'll be showing you later on. Now on the top, I'll sew the neckline. That's the facing on the neckline. I'll sew the darts. I'll do the same thing for the back. I'll sew the neckline and the dart. Then I'll show you later on. Then on the skirt, I've gone ahead to cut out the back skirt. I cut out 2. Then on the front, I've also gone ahead to cut it out. Remember, we slanted it. So I notched the hip line so that I don't mix it up. I also notched this part. So now I'll be joining this part by 9 inches. That's from the waist. I'll mark 9 inches here. So I'll just pin it up, good side to good side. So I'll be attaching a flare there. So that's why after pinning it up, I'm going to sew it by 1/2 inch. So I'm going to leave this part open for now. So from this point, I'll be attaching a flare. So what I'll do, I'm going to measure from this part that is open. I'm going to measure what I have here to the full length. So I have about 25 inches. So I'm going to place another fabric on bias fold. So I'm going to place it on bias fold like this to get a flare. So I'm going to fold it to the desired volume I want, and I'm going to take the length. I'm using 28 inches. remember the length I took was 25 inches, so it's better for it to have excess than for us to have a short flay. So I'll always trim out the excess. So I'm going to mark it all the way round. So you can add more volume. You can make this flay wider if you have enough fabric. But because I don't have enough fabric, I'm just using what I have to get the flay. So this is our flay. I folded it on bias, remember. So I'm going to attach it to this part, to this slit part here. So from this V shape here, from this V shape, I'm going to attach it here like this. So I'm going to turn it over good side to good side. Then I'm going to place it on this pointed part. I'm going to place it here, making sure it's well covered. Then I'm going to pin it up. I'll be sewing it by 1/2 or 1/4 inch. So this is how we're going to sew it on the skirt. So I'll repeat the same thing on the other side. I'll turn it over, making sure this part is properly placed. It's important you place it accurately so that it will lay flat. So I'll also pin this side up. I'll be sewing it by 1/2 inch. So we'll be sewing it later on. So we'll have something like this when we place the flay on in between the slitted part. So I'll be placing a casing here later. I'll explain that. Now on the back, I'll be sewing the center back. I've also notched the hip line so that I won't mix it up. And I'll come down by 9 inch for the zipper allowance, and I'll sew it by 1 inch all the way to the full length. So I'll sew it and show you later. So on the top pattern, I've fixed the darts. So on the facing, I've added interfacing, I've stitched it, and I left 1 inch open here for the zipper allowance. I repeated the same thing on the other side of the back panel. So this is the front panel. I've also stitched the darts, and I've also placed the facing on the neckline. So I've also added interfacing on the band, on both bands. I added interfacing. Remember, I cut it by 3 inches. That's the width. Then on the front panel, I'm going to join the front and back panel together on the shoulder. So I'll just make sure I place it properly. So I'll place, that's the shoulders together. That's the facing to facing and fabric to fabric. So I'll make sure it's aligning on the stitch part here, like so. So I'll pin it up. So I'll do the same thing for the other shoulder. I'll make sure it's aligning. Then I'll sew it by 1/2 inch. When I do that, on the sides, remember we left 1.5 inches for seam allowance. I'm going to use the 1.5 inches to sew it all the way down on both sides. So I'll do that and show you when I'm done. So guys, I've joined the side seam together. I've also joined the shoulder. So this is the shoulder and this is the side seam. Now on the band, I'm going to get the center of the band. I'm going to fold it into 2 equal half like this. I'll repeat the same thing on the other band. So I'm going to notch this part here, the center. So I'll repeat the same thing on the top. I'll get the center of the top. I'll fold it into 2 equal half and I'll get the center. So I'll place it on the band, good side to good side like this. So after placing it like this, I'm going to place the second band on top like so, on the center. So that means the dress is in between the 2 bands. The dress is on the center and the 2 bands are on both sides. So I'll pin it up and I'll be sewing it by 1/2 inch. So I'll sew it here and I'll show you when I'm done. So guys, I've attached the band to the top. So I cut out the excess on the band. So now on the skirt, I've attached the flay on it. I've gone ahead to sew it. On the wrong side, this is where I attached, this is the flay I attached on the skirt. So this is the outcome. So I won't be following this line, this first line. I'll be following the second line. I'll be placing a casing on it. But before I place a casing, I'm going to hem the full length. I'm going to hem it by 1 inch. So after I hem it, I'm going to attach a casing on this slanted part of the skirt. So I've gone ahead to cut out another strip of fabric for the casing. So I made it 2.5 inches wide. So this is a 2.5 inches. So I folded it by half an inch on both sides and I gave it a good press so that it will stay firm. So I'll be left with 1.5 inches for the casing. So I'll place it here like this. So I'll make sure it's properly placed. It will be placed flat. Remember I said I'm going to hem the lower part, that's the full length. So I'll be stitching here by 1/4 inch all the way to the end here. I'll repeat the same thing on this other side. Make a very tiny stitch. So after stitching it, I'll make sure I get the center, and I'll also stitch the center where the strap will be passing through. I'll be explaining this later on. So now on the center back, I've gone ahead to stitch it by 1 inch and I left this part open for the zipper allowance. So I'll also be hemming the full length by 1 inch, just like we did for the back. So I've cut out another strip of fabric. I'll be using it to do the strap that will go through the casing. So I cut it by 1 inch. I folded 1/4 inch on both sides like this. Then I'm going to refold it again, like so. So I'm going to sew it all the way. I'll make sure I sew the top part. I'll top stitch it also so that it will be neat. So I'll go ahead and sew it, then I'll come back and show you. So I'll be sewing 2 straps. So I've attached the casing to the skirt. So because of the print on the fabric is not visible enough, so I stitched the center also where the strap will be passing through. Then I also went ahead to join the side seam, that's the front and back together. I stitched it by 2 inches all the way down. Then after doing that, I now stitch the hemline by 1 inch all round. So this is the zipper allowance. So now I'll be attaching the strap to the casing. Like I said, I made 2 straps. I'll be using safety pin to tuck it in. So this is the safety pin. I'll be fixing it on the first casing like this. So I'll pull it out. So after doing this, I'll fix the second strap to the second casing. So the next thing I'll do, I'm going to top stitch this part here. I'll top stitch here so that it doesn't pull out. So I've measured the waist round on the skirt to make sure it's the accurate waist measurement I need. Now I'll be joining the top and the skirt together. So what I'll do, I'm going to get the center of the the center of the top. Then I'm going to also do the same thing on the skirt. So I'll also notch the center of the skirt. Then I'll place them together, good side to good side, like so. So I'll pin it up. So I'll be sewing it by half an inch all the way to the end. I'll show you. So guys, I've fixed the top to the skirt. Now it's, as you can see, this is where I stitched. I'll be weaving this part later on. Then now I'll be fixing the zipper to the dress. So this is the zip I'll be using. So I left 1 inch for zipper allowance. I'm sure by now you know how to fix a zip. So now I'll go ahead and fix it and I'll come back and show you. So I'll fix the zipper to the dress. So let me open it up. So after fixing the zip, I use the facing to top stitch on the zip. So after doing this, I now stitched very close to the zip here. That's the facing. I stitch on the facing. Then when I turn it to the good side, I have something like this. So I repeated the same thing on the other side of the zip. So I'll be using my weaving machine to weave all these parts later on. So we are almost done with the dress. Now we'll be fixing the sleeve. I've gone ahead to cut out the sleeve. I'm sure you know how to cut a sleeve. I'll be dropping the link on the description box on how to draft a basic sleeve. So this is our sleeve. So it's a long sleeve. It's just a normal basic sleeve. So I'll be joining it. I will join the side seam by 1 inch all the way to the end. Then I'll also hem the full length. After doing that, I'll fix it to the dress and I'll come back and show you. So I've fixed the sleeve. I've also hemmed the full length. So I've attached it to the armhole. Our dress is ready. So this is the ruched part. I always find it difficult to call it. I guess I'll say ruched. This is the ruched part of the dress. So you just pull it out however you want. Then you just tie it up like this. So the length of the dress is about 50 inches. I would have loved it to be longer than what I have here. If I had known, maybe I would have used like 55 inches for the length of the dress. But it's still fine. The dress is still okay. That's if you want it to be longer than this. We've come to the end of these tutorials. I hope it was helpful. Please don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and share. Thanks for watching. See you in my next video.